Hey everybody, before we get started on today's video, I wanted to let you guys know that my best friend Frederick and I just started a podcast that is down below in the description. Today's video is a little bit more of a longer talking style of video that is very, very similar to that podcast. So if you love American in Sweden content, go ahead and check that out. The name of the podcast is Culture Shocks, and we're super excited about it. And also a big thanks to Jane for joining me on the channel here today. She also has a YouTube channel. You can also see that down below in the description. Now let's jump into the video. What's up everybody? It's Stefan here, joined by my friend Jane.
Hi guys.
And today is the 3-year anniversary of my first ever video on this YouTube channel, which was how to learn a new language in 6 months, because I wanted my videos on YouTube to be helpful to you guys. And I was in the process of learning Swedish after having been here for 6 months. And if you guys have followed my channel at all, you've now seen my language journey over the amount of time that I've been here. And I wanted to update this video and reflect a little bit on what works and what doesn't when it comes to learning a new language. And that's why I brought Jane on, because she's sort of a language expert, actually. How many languages do you speak, Jane?
So I speak fluently 5 languages and 2 languages in progress.
What are the languages that you speak fluently?
So Spanish, Catalan, Russian, Ukrainian, and English.
Wow, that's really impressive.
And then French and Swedish.
Yeah, I'm at like maybe 2 3/4 because I have English, obviously, my native language. I can speak Swedish, I would say, fluently now. And I would say between German and Spanish, that's like, neither one of them is even half fluent. So I think those together is maybe 3/4. I used to be much, much better in German than I was. So I'm going to say I'm at 2 3/4, even though that's between 4 languages.
But you can have a fluent conversation in German?
No, I mean, if I live in Germany for like a couple of months, then I think I would pick it up really fast, because I was fluent in German when I was a kid, but now it's been so long. I know when I go back to Germany, I really start to pick it up. But when I try to speak German, I just end up mixing. I end up mixing German and Swedish, and so like it's enough to impress like Swedish people that are with me if I'm traveling. Like
I think it's such a tough language, German, to me. It's something that I don't know if I would want to learn.
It is tough. The grammar is no joke in German. For people that say Swedish grammar is tough, I mean German grammar is a completely different level, because like when it comes to the article, like in English we have the word the, and you can use the for everything. The girl, the boy, the bathroom, the kitchen. In Swedish you have 2 forms. You have en and et. But 80% of the time it's n. So if you're not sure, you can always guess n, and you're usually going to be right. And you just have to kind of learn the ones that are et.
You have to learn, actually.
You do have to learn the ones that are et, but in German, you have 3 different ones, and each one is about 33%.
Oh my gosh.
So if you didn't grow up with the German language, you literally, for every single new noun that you learn, you have to know, okay, is this a masculine, a feminine, or a neuter noun? And there's really no rhyme or reason. Like, girl in German is neuter, but woman is feminine. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like in German, you say der for if you're saying man or boy. If you're saying woman, you say die, which is the feminine. And if you say girl, you say das, which is the neuter. Like, why is girl neuter? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So in Swedish, it's much, much easier in that regard when you compare to German, but still like harder than English, because in English we only have 1. So the grammar is completely different in every single language. But from your perspective, what is the number one way, if you want to learn a language, what is the most important thing? What is the best thing that you can do to learn a language?
I mean, linguistic immersion, which basically means to surround yourself by native speakers, to live in the country. Like when I moved to Spain, I had no idea of Spanish. I couldn't speak. I had no idea. I didn't know a word. Yeah. So yeah, to me it was like, surround myself by Spanish, like TV, news, and just living in the country, you know.
Everything, yeah. I think that is the number one way. I always get questions from people on like Instagram and stuff that like want to learn Swedish, and they're always asking me like, how do I learn Swedish? I'm living in America. And it's really, really tough if you're not
is.
living in a country where people actually speak that language, because I think the number one easiest and fastest way, like you said, is to just live in that country and you're just surrounded by it all the time. You're just constantly seeing it, like you said, in the news, on TV, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Other people, you're surrounded by native speakers. You're reading the street signs in that language. You're hearing it.
Like it's only Swedish.
Like
so.
your brain can process so much more information when you're just immersed in that environment. And I know, like for me personally, before moving to Sweden, I studied Swedish every day on Duolingo for 3 or 4 months of putting in several hours every single day on Duolingo. And it gave me a really good like base, like understanding like, oh, here's some words and here's how everything kind of works a little bit. But like even after 4 months of studying and putting in multiple hours every single day on Duolingo, when I moved to Sweden,
I was like,
I only understood maybe like 10-15%. Like learning a language is not easy. And for me to try to like put together sentences and stuff, it took like, I would say 3 or 4 months after living in Sweden till I could start to formulate sentences and really like start to put my thoughts together. And that was even after studying on Duolingo.
Yeah.
So I would say like, if you want to learn a new language, like it can be really good to start with a Duolingo and build up some like basics, some vocabulary, because ultimately like you need to have a vocabulary in that language to be able to express yourself. And like I always tell people to start with like the basic words, like how do you say I want something? How do you say I need something? How do you say I see something? Like things that are like very, very
like immediate things.
Exactly.
That you need
like when
on a daily basis.
Like I'm going through the process of trying to learn Spanish right now, and because I don't live in Spain or a Latin American country, it's very, very challenging. But I always try to break it down like, okay, what are the most like commonly used words? So I would go through like a list of like 100 most common Spanish words or like 1,000 most common Spanish words and study those and try to learn those, because like when it comes down to it, you can learn like 95% of a language if you know the first 1,000 words or the most common 1,000 words. Even if there might be like 30,000-40,000 words in a language, if you know the like most popular, most used words, you can really say almost everything that like you really want to say.
And get a lot. Understand a lot around.
Exactly. So I think that's where Duolingo can help you in the beginning, like learning that vocabulary, just so you have some words to work with. So like if I go to Spain, I could like maybe express myself like necesito agua, like I need water, or like quiero comida, like I want food, you know, like being able to like put these like basics, like how do you say food? How do you say water? How do you say do something? How do you say I'm going somewhere? Like all these really basic words, and then you can start to formulate like basic sentences. Yeah, I would say that's like the best place to start, because I think sometimes that can be like the frustration with Duolingo, because I remember like when I was on Duolingo, I think Duolingo's gotten better over the years, but like 3 years ago when I was on Duolingo, I was learning things like sentences like jag, är, and fisk. You know, like I am a fish in Swedish. It's like, when am I ever going to use that? Or like, I remember one of the words that I learned in like the first lesson was like sköldpadda, which is like turtle. And I think even after living in
like,
Sweden, I've lived in Sweden for like 3 years, and I don't think I've ever used the word turtle. Like we don't even have turtles in Sweden.
It's a waste of time.
So like some of the words are just like not really necessary. Like I have a theory. The reason why they try to teach you the word turtle is because it makes like sköldpadda. It's like a sound that you don't really use in English. So they're like, all right, let's teach them the word turtle so they can try to master the sound. But I think, exactly. Like kartuska. Like I think they're trying to like maybe give you some practice with that sound. Maybe that's why they threw it in early. I don't know what their plan was there, but I think like in the 3 years that I've lived here, the only time I've used the word turtle is when I'm telling that story about learning the word turtle on Duolingo. So I definitely think immersion is nice, but Duolingo can be a good place to start if you do not have the ability to be immersed.
Yeah, exactly.
So Aside from Duolingo and immersion, what are some other tips that can really, really help people?
I think watching movies, Netflix, or YouTube as well, because there are a lot of how to learn any language, and you have native speakers out there teaching you, and so you hear how they pronounce. And because I remember I used to watch some videos on YouTube about Swedish, so I learned how to pronounce oa or this kind of, So movies, YouTube, and especially I think it's really important with subtitles, because so you see how it's written as well. Yeah. So if you don't catch that word or something, you can just read it. But
now, what do you think is easier? I'm going to ask you a question, because when I moved to Sweden, most of the content that people watch on TV is still in English, because they just do Swedish subtitles for a lot of the content. And I actually thought that it was very, very helpful to watch a show in English, but at the same time be reading the subtitles. Because I remember when I moved here with my Swedish girlfriend at first, she had never seen Game of Thrones, for example. 7 seasons. So we had, hours and hours and hours, probably 50 hours of content. And I rewatched it, but because I'd already seen it, we had the Swedish subtitles on, and I was focused on learning Swedish. So I wasn't only focused on watching the show, because I'd already seen it anyway. I was focused on, all right, let's try to learn as much Swedish as we can, and I'm going to read as much as I can while she's watching the show. But my question is, what do you think is better between that, where you're listening to the show in your native language and reading the subtitles in another language, or do you think it's better if you're listening to the language that you want to learn? Say that they had dubbed Game of Thrones in Swedish and had English subtitles. Which one do you think would be better? Because I find sometimes for me, if I watch a show in Spanish or Swedish, for example, but there's English subtitles, the audio part of my brain will just turn off. Because I'm I'm reading exactly what I need to learn. It's right here in English. I don't even really have to think as much, but I'm curious if that's similar for you.
I think to me it's better it's absolutely opposite probably, because normally what I do, because I still do it because I'm learning Swedish. So what I do is to watch in Swedish and have Swedish subtitles. So even if I don't get something, I still hear it and read it. Yeah. So,
but I think that has to come at a certain point where you're already starting. I think you are have a gift with languages, so it comes really fast and naturally for you. So for me, I would say, some people think I have a gift with languages. I don't really think I do, because I've been trying to study Spanish for several months now, and I can watch something on TV in Spanish and really not get it. I might pick out a word here and a word there, and I think for me it's I really need to, I don't know, I really need those subtitles in English. If I'm only hearing the Spanish, but I think once you get to a certain point where, let's say, you can understand more than 50% of what's being said.
It depends what is your level as
exactly. Well. So maybe it's actually better to start reading the subtitles in another language, and then as you start to learn more vocabulary and everything, then you can sort of flip it.
Yeah, after 5-6 months.
Yeah.
So I think so. Yeah. Yeah, first you just focus on subtitles, read, and then when you understand, you switch to that language and subtitles.
Exactly.
In that language. Yeah. I think so.
I think one of the most interesting things too is if learning the language is a want or need. Do you want to learn this language, or do you need to learn this language?
This is so important.
Because in Sweden, there's a lot of people, everybody wants to learn Swedish, who doesn't want to learn a new language? And there's a lot of English speakers that move to Sweden and they're I want to learn Swedish, but they never learn, because everybody here speaks pretty much perfect English, and you never need to use the Swedish. And even now, after living here for 3 years in Sweden and speaking fluent Swedish, there's even times now where I'm it would just be so nice and comfortable for me to speak English if I'm going to a store and asking about some weird product that I don't know the name of or something. It's so in Sweden, I think that is the number one thing that makes it hard to learn a language here, because people don't need to speak it. Whereas people that go to Spain, for example, or France, or some of these other countries, the people there do not speak fluent English
it's
as
not
much.
really common. No.
So you're forced to. You have to use it. And I think that really goes to show, like, the more you're forced to use it or the more you force yourself to use it. I think that's the key takeaway from all this is if you can force yourself to use it, that's how you can really make the most progress.
But I think it's not nice to force yourself
It's
because
not nice.
you have to want it. You must want to learn it because if it's something that feels like, oh, I have to learn now, study this and that, it's not. You will not just enjoy, and you will not learn anything. I think so. I think you have to have a why. Why would you learn that language? You have to want it.
You have to be able to motivate yourself because learning a language is not easy.
And it's not. Sometimes it's not so fun because there are a lot of stuff that you might not understand.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have like a really like a heavy reason enough behind to like. Yeah, I want to learn that language.
Yeah.
I, for example, need Swedish here because everyone speaks English, but if you want to integrate, you have to speak Swedish because like everything is in Swedish. So and people, I think people actually also take you more seriously if you speak Swedish. So
I always have like a really, really natural curiosity with languages that I think has like helped me because like I'll see a word and I'm so curious, or like I hear what people are saying and I'm like really naturally like a curious person. So I really have always wanted that. Like I wouldn't be comfortable like living in a place and like people are just talking and I'm like and not having any sort of clue. Like I really, really am curious, and I think that's what sort of like motivated me. And then also dating a Swedish girl, and I'm like, all right, I moved to this country with this girl, like I want to be able to like be a part of her family and stuff, you know, like I want to be able to speak Swedish with them. That was always like super important for me. And also that was like part of the motivating factor, but also my first job in Sweden, I was a teacher, and I had like 4th grade students in some of my classes, 4th and 5th graders. And as great as Swedes are in English, like at that early age, like they're not quite fluent yet. And even though it was an international school and technically like English was an okay language for me to teach in, like the kids at that level, they were just not ready after they came from like the before grundskola, you know, it's like 3rd grade. When they come from 3rd grade, they're not ready to speak fluent English with their teachers. So it sort of like forced me to learn Swedish, because I remember my first lesson at this school. I sat my whole class down on the bench, and this was my first week in Sweden. I had my Duolingo practice, but that was about it. Like I could barely string a sentence together in Swedish, and I had my obstacle course set up. I was teaching PE and everything, and I told the class what we were doing. And
in Swedish?
In English.
Oh.
I couldn't speak Swedish, like not much. Like I could do like the basics.
You guys.
And at the end of me explaining what we were doing in the day's lesson, the kids just like all start like turning to each other and like whispering to each other in Swedish, like, what is he saying? What is he saying? God. And I could just tell the confusion on their faces, and I was just like, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? And so I asked the class, I'm like, all right, who here speaks English? And there was just like one kid that was like really into video games, and he's just like really shy, like, I do. And I was like, all right, tell them what I said. And then they were able to figure it out. But after teaching in the school for 6 months, you know, it really, really made the difference. It was that thing that like was the
struggle.
Forced me. It forced me to learn language. And I remember like when kids would break the rules or goof off or do things wrong, and then you tell them what they did wrong in English, and they just pretend like, I don't know. I'm like, all right, do den där inte bra. Like that was not okay. And then they're like, I just remember one kid, he's like, jag lovar, jag ska inte göra det igen. And I was like, lovar, what the hell does that mean? And then I was like, all right, that sounds good. And then he left, and then I like pulled up Google Translate. I was like, what is lovar? Oh, he promised he wouldn't do it again. Yeah, exactly. So that's how you learn a word. Like in that experience, I would never forget what lovar means, because I was in that situation, and I'll remember this kid who broke the rules, and he's like, jag lovar, jag ska inte göra det igen. And I just remember like, I will never forget the word promise in Swedish now because of that specific experience.
But wow, that was insane. I think I would be scared. I think I would be so scared. Like wow, everyone's staring at you and you speaking English. Like,
It was like a moment where I'm like, what did I get myself into? But
oops.
Had I not been through that, I don't think I would have learned Swedish nearly as fast as I did.
Everything is like, oh, that's okay.
And even now it's like I don't have to speak Swedish like on a daily basis living here.
You don't have to?
No, I mean, I work from home, and I mean, I don't use Swedish that much, but I know like at this point now I can if I have to, which is really nice. But it's not like living in another country, like I was saying before, where like you cannot communicate with people if you cannot do it. But now in my day-to-day life and job, like I work with all adults that are all fluent in English, and it's just different.
My problem is that I'm really scared of making a mistake or saying something that is not correct. I'm still struggling with that because my boyfriend is Swedish and I've been here for a year. And I always think, girl, you have to speak Swedish. Like, you have a native speaker in front of you. Like, what's going on? And my always problem is to open my mouth and just say something. Just speak. I think in Swedish. I think because, I try to. I don't know. I speak in English and. I translated it to Swedish and I should have said this and that, and I end up just speaking in English, and it's like, you guys, you just have to dare to speak, and that's all. You just forget about that fear, and that's all. It is
tough. It is really tough. I mean, I remember I had the same problem with Lynn in the beginning when I moved to Sweden.
I just so shy. Oh my God, and it's so frustrating because I can speak, and sometimes I even sound, like I really sound Swedish because I don't know, I practice a lot as well on my own. But out there, you guys, that's so annoying.
It's tough, and you have to be with somebody that's patient because I remember when I was not very good at Swedish and I wanted to practice, it was hard because I would like try to say something in Swedish, and then the people would like sort of get what I was saying, and then they would say something back in Swedish, and I would just be like, wait, what was that? Can you say that slower? Can you like say it again? Can you tell me what this word means? And like when you're just trying to have a conversation and communicate with somebody, it's like they're like, let's just switch to English because they don't want to sit there and explain.
But they switch to English.
Exactly.
Like always when you don't get it at the first time, they just switch it. They don't repeat it. Like,
so you need to practice with somebody who is patient, that wants to help you, and that is really
This
really
is
helpful.
my case, but as I said before, my problem is that I'm shy. I'm scared to just making stupid mistakes. And
I think the key with that is just realizing that
that's
like you have to make mistakes. Like you will get better by making mistakes. And I know like sometimes when I would make mistakes in Swedish and some people would try to help me and they say, oh, you did this and this and this wrong. And I'm like, I'm still trying to learn how to say like basic stuff. Like I need water. And you're over here correcting like some super advanced stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to learn that now. But it's like once you hear something enough times and you never know what's going to stick with you. Because so many people have corrected me on my journey. And I remember, like, a lot of it, I just like, oh, I'll try to remember that, and then I forget it. But, like, other times, I can still remember, like, specific instances of, like, when I was teaching a class of 9th graders, for example, and I was like, okay, vi ska göra en till. And one of the 9th graders was like, it's not till, it's till, and till. And I just remember, like, it's so weird that stuck with me, like, there's so many people that have corrected me over the years, but that specific instance of this one kid, and I'm like, what? I've been saying this wrong the whole time. That's crazy. And that was like after I'd already been in Sweden for like 7 months.
I remember this in Spanish as well at school. So someone was saying something to me, and I couldn't understand because I didn't know what was that. And next day I just memorized it home, and I was like, okay, now I understand, but it's a bit too late, right, to understand that person. But I just had it stuck. Like, oh my god, yeah.
I think learning, you're gonna make mistakes along the way, and I think you just have to have that mindset of like mistakes are natural. It's part of the process.
But I think it's some personal struggle that they have. I'm just scared of making mistakes, but I still try, and I still do it, even if I'm scared.
I think that's part of the problem if you're like a perfectionist that wants everything to be perfect.
That's not good to be perfect.
It's really difficult, and I think that can sometimes like set you back because where you could like try something and be terrible at it, like it's better to do it and be terrible at it. Like, I think with a lot of things, like people that want to start a YouTube channel, for example, they're like, everything has to be perfect, and they're stressed and worried about everything, and they watch these big YouTubers that are so good at what they do, and they compare themselves, and then they like never post anything on YouTube because
they expect to be perfect as that YouTuber that has 1 million subscribers.
But I think the best thing is to just put it out there, and even if it's bad, you're gonna learn, and I think that's the same with like learning a language.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, one thing that I want to recommend before we wrap this video up is what I've been using with Jane lately, because I've been trying to learn Spanish. And like I said, when you're on Duolingo, you learn like random words that maybe aren't super helpful. And I want to learn like the most important words. Like, what am I going to use on a day-to-day basis? Yeah. So if I just want to speak like my natural thing that I'm speaking, like I want to learn how to say the things that I want to say in Spanish. So one of the things that I did is I found on the App Store, there's all these like apps where you can add a translator to your keyboard in your iPhone. And basically with this, you can write whatever you want in your native language and then press a button and it'll send in whatever language you want. So like for us, we've been having conversations completely in Spanish.
Yeah, I was like,
which is really cool. She thought I just like got super good at Spanish all the time. But like I'm at that phase in Spanish now where I'm like, I know the basic words. I can kind of like, oh, I want to say this. I could probably like say it like this and this and this, but I'm not really sure. So it's nice because I can just write it in English, press a button, boom, it's perfectly there in Spanish, and then I can see, oh, that's how I would have said that. And then I'm like studying that, and then I can study your responses. I read it first without translating it. I'm like, okay, what do I think she said? Can I understand it? And then I'll do the translate and see if I missed anything. And that can be a really, really great way, because if, like I said, if you want to speak with a native and use the language, that's going to really, really help you to pick it up. And for me, I think even in the week of using these keyboard apps, it's been really helpful. There's a whole bunch of them on the App Store. Just type in translator keyboard, and some of them you have to pay for, but they have free trials. You can experiment and find one that you like. But for me, it's been pretty helpful.
Yeah, I was so impressed. I was like, well, what's going on over here? It was just fluent. Like I was really impressed.
Well, I'm working on it. I'm not quite up to that level yet, but so with that, guys, we've been going on for a while here. Let's wrap this video up.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, what languages have you guys been trying to learn? Comment down below, and if you guys have any tips, happy to see what's been working for you, what hasn't been working for you. I think that's really, really interesting to see. But with that, we're going to now make a video on Jane's channel. So if you want to see more of me and more of my story, I'll link that video down below in the description.
Exactly.
And with that, guys, hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in another video.
Bye.